Knock, knock.
Who's there?
We're
Who?
We're about to show you how to make some shutters.
Okay, the first thing we did is do a little shopping around online to compare prices and find the best place to purchase the fence pickets. The best place that I found was Menards, and they had these 6-foot cedar fence pickets for just under $3 a piece. And then when you go out to Menards, make sure you have some time to kill, and make sure that you are wearing comfortable clothes and something that you can dig through the wood, because it's outside and it's a lot of work pulling out those pickets and laying them down. So when we're picking out a picket, one of the most important things is, especially if you're not going to paint it but you want to stain it, is looking for character in your wood. I like a lot of color in my wood, a lot of veining. So this one is a really nice fence picket. But then you also need to look for something that is nice and flat and doesn't have a lot of warping to it. When you blade them down on the ground, you'll find out how flat they are. Also, one of the things you want to look for is cracking. You'll have a little bit of cracking around the knots, but you don't want a lot of cracking. Like I picked up this one, really liking it, and I don't know if it cracked after I bought it or I just didn't notice the crack when I bought it. But that one, we can probably use sections of it, but we won't be able to use the end of it. But some of these are a little bit, as you can see, are a little bit more warped than others, and you might be able to use smaller sections of those. More for the window box where we're cutting it down into smaller pieces. But the ones that are nice and flat, they don't move when you touch them, or they don't have too much bounce to them or movement to them, those are going to be our ideal pieces for making the actual big shutters. So the first thing we're going to do after we've selected our wood and we're ready is we will lay them out like we have them laid out on the driveway. And you want a big area to where you can lay them nice and flat, and make sure your floor is flat and clean of debris so that you don't have anything underneath. So you want to put them together, make sure they fit together nicely, and then pick your pieces and mark them so you know which piece is going where once you've done all your cutting. We are actually going to be making this set of shutters for a bay window, which is much larger in size. Even though it's still your standard size top to bottom, there is a lot more trim on this window, and it's just a little more massive in general, so a bigger shutter is going to look better. So we are going to cut these shutters. Our fence picket is a total of 72 inches. Since we are going to lose the dog ear that is on the top, we're going to go ahead and measure up to 71 inches and cut our fence picket to 71. Our window is 62 inches, but like I said, since we have so much trim at the top and bottom of this bay window, we will have plenty of room. We can make the shutters really any size in that area that we want. Okay, so the first thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and measure out to the 71 inches, and that about is almost exactly what takes off the dog ear at the top. So we're going to mark that. We're going to mark it on each side of the board. It's a good idea to have all your tools handy, because sometimes having to keep leaving and coming back is something that will make you forget something. You'll forget where you're at, or you'll forget to do something. That being said, we don't. Okay, so we measured out, and now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and mark it where we had our markings, and we probably want to make sure it's level. And we'll go ahead and mark it, and then of course with that old rule of measure twice, cut once, we're going to go ahead and measure it again to make sure our line is right where we want it to be. Line's right there on 71. We're going to go to this side of the board, and right on 71. This is where sometimes it's nice to have someone to help you. If you have a big table, it's not a problem. But sometimes to have a person working with you is helpful when you're working with long pieces of wood. So line it up, and you'll want to make sure that your saw blade is going, the left side of your saw blade is going on the edge of your line, the outside edge of your line. because you don't want to lose 1/8 of an inch. Your saw blade is 1/8 of an inch thick, and we want to keep all of our length on there. So you'll want to make sure your saw blade is right on the other side of your line. Okay, and then because we just like to be
Thorough?
huh?
Extra thorough?
Oh, thank you. And then just because we like to be certain that
I give you a
our
word and then you
measurements-
don't use it.
we like to be certain our measurements are what they're supposed to be, we're gonna check this again and make sure it's 71 inches. Okay, we did a good job cutting. Got our 3 fence pickets all cut to 71 inches. We laid them out on the table to just check to make sure they're all the same length, and they're also they fit together nicely. We have a little bit when you're dealing with fence pickets or pallet wood, same way, they're pretty imperfect. So you're dealing with a lot of warped or curved boards, and edges aren't straight. So when you put them together like this, that will help us to see how they're going to fit together, and then we can move them around to correct any problems that we might have. Since we're going for a look that doesn't have any spacing between the boards, we want to try and get them as snugly fit as possible. This particular setup, the way we have it right now, there's a little bit, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little bit of curving to this middle board. See where there's a little bit of a curve here, so it makes this board look uneven with the rest. Now it could pull it up when we go to put the cross pieces on, but we would just like to try to get the curves, if we can, of the boards going in the same direction. So we're gonna move these around a little bit and just see how that works. I feel like that if maybe we flip this board over and see how well it fits against there, that does alleviate some of our problem here. Now we have a little more gapping down there, so it just depends on the look that you're going for, but we can always cut the difference and just make it a little bit less of a gap, so that we've got most of it mostly tight in the middle. Also, you want to look for things in the boards, because we talked about that before too. This one's got a lot of pitting in it. Some of that will come out when we sand it, but not always. And then if we have cracking, you're going to have some cracking in your knots, like we talked about before, and that should not be a problem as long as we're not drilling directly on those cracks. So we'll flip this one over and we'll see. I think it fits nicely this way. It does have, as well as these, all of these, you can see that there's a mark from the banding when they put them together on the pallet. So that should sand out okay and shouldn't be a problem. These look pretty rough right now, but the sanding is really going to change these. Okay, and if you see that we got a little bit of spacing here, it could be because the outside of this board or the outside of this board isn't completely straight. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip this one over to this side and see if that helps alleviate the problem, and it does. See, now our boards fit pretty snugly together without any spacing, so we get that little bit better of a look that we're going for. We do have a little bit of the gaping here because of the bend of the board. So let's try and flip this over and just see if it makes it better or worse. It kind of made it a little bit worse. I liked it better the other way. So you just kind of keep flipping it around, turning the boards around until you find the perfect way. Or I guess there's not really much perfect way, but until you find the way that you like best. And I think it was better the other way. It's just pretty much a work in progress and trial and error.
Okay, when we're doing sanding these boards, we're going to use 2 different types of sanders. This one's a belt sander. This is going to, what we use for the flat faces of the boards. It's going to move pretty quickly. And when you're using this one, you're either going to want someone to help you hold the board, or I have a clamp here where I clamped it to the table, because if you just stick it right to the board, it might shoot out from under you and damage something. So also we're going to use this palm sander, which is kind of what we use for the edges. These are for outdoor shutters, so we're not going to get these super smooth. But anything you might be doing indoors and that you want a little bit less rugged, you might take off a little bit of the sharpness of the edge with this palm sander. For this part, we're going to use the belt sander. So belt sander is just what it sounds like. It runs the sandpaper on a loop. So you're going to want to keep it flat to the board. And you're going to want to hang on because it has a little bit of kick. But we're going to pull and go just sand with the grain. You'll notice that it starts to change color a little bit, starts to get out some of the roughness, and then just depending on how rugged you want it to be is how long you'll sand. So after you hit both sides, both flat edges with the belt sander, we're going to take the palm sander and kind of hit the edges. You just hit the sides here, but also that, like the corners of the edges, to kind of take the sharpness out of that. So. Again, we're not working very hard to get it super smooth. We're just kind of making sure it's not going to be splintery, and just make sure that it'll take the stain evenly. But that's your main goal here for outdoor. Indoor, if you're doing something inside, of course you're going to want to sand a little more, just especially if you're going to have it where people are rubbing up against it. But so we're good to go from there, and after you get everything sanded, you'll be ready for a stain.
Now that we've got everything sanded, we laid our boards back out according to the markings of how we wanted them. And look how smooth and beautiful they are. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to measure for our cross boards. We've got everything sanded and fits together nicely, so now we should be able to get a good measurement. We're going to put our cross boards about 8 inches from the end, so we can just kind of eyeball it for now just to get a good measurement here. And this end is saying, looks like 16 and 11/16. Nice measurement, huh? And then on this end, again, go about 8 inches in. And this one says 16 and 3/4. This is very typical when working with this kind of wood because you're going to have a lot of edges that aren't quite straight. That we have those little tiny gaps in here. Those little tiny gaps are what cause us to be off just a 1/16 of an inch here or there. So we do have a difference of a 1/16 of an inch between one end and the other. So we're going to cut one board to fit this end and one board to fit that end. Okay, so we picked out our board that we wanted to use for the cross pieces, and if you remember, we had the board that was cracked up top, but it's really pretty. It has a lot of coloring in it and a lot of pretty knots. So we're going to go ahead and measure out our 2 cross pieces out of this board. Okay, we've got our board out here. Now we needed one piece that was 16 and 11/16. So we're gonna go here 16, half, quarter, 11/16 right here. That is not right.
Oh, great. You ruined the video.
So we're gonna mark it out here. We wanna go 16, we got 16 and a half, so 11/16 is gonna be just shy of 16 and 3/4, so right here. And then we're gonna mark it on this side. 16, 3/4, here's 11/16. Okay. Now we are ready for our, hey, it magically appeared. And we're gonna use our straight edge to mark our board. And then we will cut first. We're not gonna mark out both pieces and then cut, because we gotta remember that we have that 1/8 of an inch saw blade width. And so if we were to mark out and measure again, you can do that if you want, but you need to account for the 1/8 of an inch. And because it just is a little bit sure of a process to go ahead and cut, then measure the next one, that's the way we like to do it. Piece cut, we're just going to kind of line it up about where we want it just to make sure. And yes, it fits perfectly. It's perfectly flush. So we're going to go ahead and cut the piece for the other end. We'll go ahead and flip this around. And again, we are marking, this one was the 16 3/4, or 16 3/4 inches. So we're going to go 16 3/4 here, 16 3/4, and here's the straight edge. And get it lined up. Again, I'm going to flip it around this way. Okay, I think we're all set there. Might have been a hair long, but we'll check it out. So, around. Take a look. Yeah, I think I got it just a hair long. So we'll shave just a little bit more off. You measured this in last time.
Actually, I measured the 11/16 in, but whatever. It's rolling.
All right. Okay, so, oops, we made a mistake. This is where measure twice, cut once is the rule of thumb. But we didn't. Well, thankfully, the mistake we made is was on the longer side instead of the shorter side. So we can just recut. We did it at 16 3/4, and it really, when I measure it again, is 16 5/8. So we'll go ahead and mark this. Okay, so we got it marked to the correct measurement now. We're going to cut this little bitty piece off. See if we can get this just right. Very particular. Okay. This is how much we were off. So that's a perfect fit. Now all we need to do is sand these two cross pieces, and then we'll be ready for staying. Okay, so now that everything is cleaned off, and your work surface is cleaned off, and all the sawdust is blown off, then we can get started on staining. So we got them all prepared. Gloves are a good idea because you don't want to get it all in the nail beds because it doesn't want to come out very well. So what we're using today was we're using the Minwax, and we like the special walnut. Gives us a nice color. It's the color that we used in the beginning of the video when we showed you the finished product of the first set of shutters that we did. So this is what we're using.
Okay, so there's a couple different ways you can stain. You can brush it on, wipe it off. We just like to put it straight on with the rag, just rub it right in. So this rag has obviously been used a few times. That's wonderful. But just a little dip. And you can just work it right into the, you don't go, obviously you want to go with the grain. Just working it right into, getting it in all the little pits, grooves, and the knots. Just rub it in. You get a nice color, make sure it's seeping in. Some places are, depending on how well you sand it or how rough the wood was in the beginning. Some places are going to take a little better than others, but that's all part of it. It gives you a nice variation in color when you're done. Okay, we're back, and it's a couple days later. We've changed our clothes, and the stain is dry, so we're going to start putting this thing together. So what we did, we laid out our boards. We had marked them before, and we laid them all out, figured out how we wanted them, marked them on the ends. So we found our markings, laid them back out like we had them, lined them up, make sure the ends are flush. Okay, so what we're going to do first is we're going to glue these pieces in place with a wood glue. Just a minute. This is premium wood glue, water resistant, interior exterior. So water resistant is important since we're doing outdoor shutters. So we're going to put this glue in place. Wood glue is a lot more powerful than it sounds like. But we're going to glue these, and then after they're glued, we're going to brad nail them. Brad nails are just a small finishing nail that's going to hold it in place so that we can flip it over, and we're going to screw it in from the back side.
Okay, so now that we're all set, we've got all of our tools together, we're going to use the tape measure, and we're just going to measure how far we want our boards from the end. It's basically about taste and what the style is you like. I like them about 8 inches from the end. So we're going to measure 8 inches from the bottom of the crossboard to the bottom of the shutter. And I'm going to mark that. Going to put a little bit of mark so I can tell where I'm taking it from, and then so when we put the glue on. And just a little bit. All right. I'll measure one more time. Make sure I get my marks good. Okay, all set. So now what we're going to do is just flip it over. We're going to try and keep the wood glue more into the center of the board, because we got to open it first. More into the center of the board, and not use too much. You want to get some glue on there, but not use too much. And the big spots, I want to usually kind of get it messed around a little bit so that it doesn't start to drip, because if it starts to drip and run, it makes a bit of a mess. So then we just have to be able to find our marks, and it's a little bit difficult to see out here today. Marks, line it back up, make sure that the ends are flush with the sides, because remember we had a different size at this end than we did the other end. Okay, so while that glue is setting up a little bit, we will go ahead and shoot some brads into this end. Hallie's going to show you how to use the brad gun.
Okay, so this step, the brad gun is going to just, what it's going to do, we're going to put 2 nails through the crossboard into each long board, just to hold it in place so that we'll be able to flip it over and actually drive the outdoor screws in. So if you don't know how to use a brad gun, it's just a gun with a trigger connected to an air compressor, so it uses the air pressure to shoot the nails into the wood. If you don't have a brad gun, you can still do this, but you'll either have to clamp it together so you can flip it and screw in from the back, or screw in from the front, but then you'll want to screw them in pretty deep and use a wood filler on top of your screws so that you don't see them. Or if you don't care that you can see them, then there you go. What we have in this gun is a 1-inch nail, because our boards here are 5/8 inches thick. So we're going to drive it through 2 boards. That's 1 1/4 inches, and you want your nail to just be a little bit shy, so obviously it's not sticking out the back side of it. So we're going to kind of stagger the nails and drive them 2 into each board. You want to get it closer in on this? I don't know how well you can see it, but okay. Ready?
now we're all ready. We've got the board flipped over and we're ready to do holes for our screws. We are going to use a countersink and drill a little bit of a hole. The countersink, what it does, I'm going to show you this close up. This is a countersink tool that you're just going to use in your drill. And we've already got ours in here that's the right size. You can get these different sizes at the tool at the hardware store. But what it will do is it will give us a little bit of a hole to start our screw, and then it'll widen up to allow for the head of the screw to sink into the board and be flush with the board, so that we don't have any head sticking out. We want it completely in the board. You can drill your screw all the way into the board, but with this type of wood, it typically will crack on you. So if we use the countersink, we can get the head all the way sunken in without having any cracks in the board. So what I like to do when I'm working with this way, where the board, the cross piece that we're screwing into is underneath. So we'll just use these 2 pieces of scrap wood that we had laying around and just kind of measure that up like that, so that we know where our cross piece is underneath, and that way we can keep our screws centered in where we would like them to be. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're basically going to do it like we did the brads. We're going to do 2 screws in each board, and we're going to do them kind of at a diagonal from each other so that we have it nice and secure. First, I'm going to go through and put in the holes, getting ready for the screws, and then we will go back and put our screws in. And as you can see, it left a nice little cutout there for the head of our screw. Now we've got all of our holes drilled and we're ready to put our screws in. What we are working with is what they call a star head screw or a Torx screw.
Okay.
And so if you're going to use that type of a screw, then you'll want to have the right kind of bit, which is this star bit or Torx bit.
Doesn't want to focus. Come on, camera. Well, you'll know. It matches. It matches the screw.
Okay.
Talk loud. It's raining.
Okay. You do. Okay, and of course it's raining out today. We had to film today, but we'll just make do. So I'll try and talk loud so you can hear me, but we're just going to go ahead and drill these in. And as you see, the head will just sink down into the board. Okay, that takes care of this side. We're just going to finish the other side, and then we'll be ready to finish up.